Participants, we have reached the second topic part of our international perspectives. It is called, I just repeat it once more, Promotion of Young Talent. I think that is a very inspiring title. The procedure will be the same as in the first topic. We will first hear two international guests. Let me shortly introduce the first one. Betty Avila is the Executive Director of Self-Help Graphics since 2018, which is a renowned organization for empowering the Latin American communities of Los Angeles through arts. Betty Avila is also the chair of the Latinx Arts Alliance and a board member for other initiatives focusing on the intersection of arts and social justice, a subject which we have heard a lot already about. Her work is focused on community building, public space, and youth empowerment. And she said about diversity in institutions, I quote, "It has to go beyond the superficial. It has to go beyond, look, we have young people, we have people of color. It's much more about how we are centering those voices within our work and not having it be the window dressing," unquote. Betty has also recorded her talk shortly before the conference. So cultural institutions that reflect the community's nurturing emerging talent, a wonderful phrase. Welcome, Betty Avila. Dear technical team, please roll it.
Diversity, equity, access, and inclusion is at the tip of everyone's tongue in the museum and cultural sector in the United States. And while this has been a trending topic for many years, it truly came to a head in the summer of 2020, when the murder of George Floyd sparked a racial awakening here that is calling for action and accountability. In museums and cultural institutions, this has focused a lens on how and a demand for a work environment that is not toxic, that embraces conflict and difference as part of the journey to create a genuinely inclusive environment. Recognizing that every place and context is different and will require a nuanced approach, I'll offer here a few strategies and prompts to address the lack of diversity and inclusivity in the museum field. It is also my hope that you will consider the following two things. This work should be part of your ongoing practice as scholars and administrators, as this is not something that gets fixed or resolved overnight. It will require a commitment that spans across the institution and takes time. Secondly, emerging talent includes young people, but it also includes people of many stages of life who may be interested in the field. So I hope that you'll be open to what emerging talent really means. I'll start with my personal example that kickstarted my own journey in the field. In 1992, the Getty Foundation responded to the civil unrest in the wake of the Los Angeles riots by creating the Multicultural Undergraduate Internship Program. The program provided funds for museums and visual arts organizations across Los Angeles County to host paid internships over the summer for people of color who have traditionally been unrepresented in the field. Now entering its 30th year, the program has helped launch careers in the arts for people working all over the United States. I participated in 2006 as an intern at the Getty Research Institute, and here's why my experience was successful. The internships are paid. People of color, immigrants, working class people often can't afford to work unpaid, even while still in undergraduate studies and when maybe familial obligations are not present yet. In order to recruit this talent, you must provide some level of compensation and not assume that the privilege of working at your institution is enough. It may get them through the door, but it won't be enough to retain talent in the field if people have to pay dues by working for free. Paying interns also changes the dynamic for those working with the intern because they're paid colleagues and there's a value attached to their time. I was part of a cohort. Not only did I meet and connect daily with the other participants in the program on the Getty campus, I also got to connect with participants who were working at other cultural institutions and organizations across the county in the program as well. Those touch points were so critical for me to learn from other people's experiences, to commiserate, and to unpack together the unspoken etiquette and ways of working in cultural institutions that no one teaches you. It's so important to create a built-in community of support. It's incredibly challenging to be the only one of anything in the room, whether it's being the only woman, the only immigrant, the only person who is overcoming language barriers, or in some cases, the only person who may be of a different social class or economic class. When that is the case, you create the opportunity for alienation, and for that person to become othered and tokenized. That kind of environment causes harm and will ultimately drive people away. And you'd be surprised how strong the bonds of this type of community that you create can become. I've remained friends with people in my cohort, now 15 years since, and when I meet other alumni of the program, even if we weren't in the same year, it's an immediate shared experience that connects us and that exists really throughout the Los Angeles art and culture sector. Provide ongoing professional development and points of support. And this has been a really critical and key element of the Getty's program. If you're committed to nurturing new talent in the field, that needs to include intentional support for their growth over time. As an alumni of the program, I still get access to conferences locally, regionally, and nationally, again, 15 years later. Within an institution, that kind of investment can be what keeps someone on your staff because they feel invested in and prioritized. The final two thoughts I want to share here require serious introspection for museums and cultural institutions. The first is centered on recruitment. If you are truly interested in bringing in emerging talent that will diversify your staff, posting a job or internship in the usual places is just not enough. I myself hadn't ever considered working in a museum until I found out about the Getty program because it was posted at my university. And I had friends who had participated in the program previously. You have to come up with a strategy to meet people where they are. And those places might not be what you're thinking of or have traditionally thought of in the past. Where are you posting the job description and for how long? If you're seeking students, it's a little bit more straightforward, but if you're wanting to bring in other perspectives, you have to plan for this. Sitting on the cultural institution plinth and waiting for people to come to you will result in failure. So when someone says, well, we tried, they just didn't apply, no, you didn't. And give yourself the room to learn as well. One strategy may not work this time, but the next time it could be great. You'll have to make adjustments and evolve your strategy over time, but that investment of time is critical to the success. And the second is about ownership throughout the institution. If the goal of increasing diversity and inclusion in your institution sits within one department, or worse, even just one person, then it's a superficial effort and it will achieve only superficial results. The senior leadership must be invested and willing to provide the resources and time for those who are leading these efforts. The thing about this strategy and these types of programs is, especially in the case of the Getty, this program evolved over time. What it looks like now is not necessarily what it looked like 30 years ago, but the important part is that they never let up, that the resources continue to be there to provide this pathway for young people coming into the field. And as someone who is a direct recipient and beneficiary of that experience, I can share with you that it is what brought me into the field and what has kept me here. Again, I also want to reiterate, this will look and feel very different in every institution. And this process, there's no one size fits all, but I really encourage you to consider just starting and not thinking about it has to be perfect right away. It has to yield this kind of result immediately. It really is going to be a work that is an evolution for you in your institution, in your organization. But it has to be something that you don't give up on immediately because you didn't get the results immediately. I guarantee that if you keep pushing, you will find that folks will continue to come and you'll understand what success looks like within your institution. Thank you so much, and I hope that I've left you with some prompts and thoughts to inspire and to consider as you move forward in this work to bring in amazing, talented young people into your institutions.
Thank you so much, Betty Avila, for your words. This was a perfect prequel for our second guest, and I will see you later for our joint talk. Our second guest is Sophie Vögele. She is the senior researcher in arts education at Zurich University of the Arts. She is responsible for coordinating and developing the research in arts education there and also teaches art education and design. Her research focuses on social inequality and critique within higher education and the arts. We have just heard a few aspects of it. And therefore also on the mechanisms of inclusion and exclusion in her current research. She is really interested in the complexity of processes which contain institutional othering in the arts. She explores the critique from a feminist post-colonial perspective. And let me also share a quote from her from our preliminary talk. I quote, "In higher education, we are meant to be accessible to everyone. Art schools have a huge potential of looking ahead. They should think it over, how they can have a more inclusive and welcoming profile. Only then things will change, even the curricula," unquote. The title of her talk is The Problem of Institutional Normativity, or Why Diversity is a Challenge at Art Colleges. She also pre-recorded her talk shortly before the conference. Dear technical team, please roll it.
Ich freue mich sehr, die Gelegenheit zu haben, einen Input zu erhalten. Ganz besonders möchte ich mich auch bei Sophie Vögele und Anna Jožić für den wertvollen inhaltlichen Austausch und die Anregungen bedanken. In meinem Vortrag möchte ich die Funktionsweise der institutionellen Normativität an Kunsthochschulen erklären und damit auch der Frage nachgehen, warum die Einlösung von Diversität in der Kunstausbildung eine Herausforderung ist. Um darzulegen, was ich mit institutioneller Normativität meine, ist es vorerst notwendig, euch in das Forschungsprojekt Art School Differences einzuführen. Das Projekt haben wir mit 3 schweizerischen Kunsthochschulen durchgeführt. 2 davon waren in Genf und das Leading House war die Zürcher Hochschule der Künste. Das Projekt dauerte 3 Jahre und wurde Ende 2016 abgeschlossen. Es ist also schon eine Weile her. Aber und trotzdem scheinen das Forschungsvorhaben, das Carmen Mörsch, Katrin Seefranz und Philipp Sanner entwickelten, wie auch die Erkenntnisse des größeren Forschungsteams nach wie vor sehr relevant. Den Fokus der Studie bildeten die Prozesse des Aufnahmeverfahrens zur Auswahl von Studierenden. Dabei ging es darum zu verstehen, was Prozesse von Ein- und Ausschluss sind und wie sich Dynamiken der Ungleichheit innerhalb institutioneller Strukturen abspielen. Die Vorstudie zum Projekt hatte bereits deutlich gezeigt, dass bestimmte gesellschaftliche Gruppen an den Kunsthochschulen unter den Studierenden nicht vertreten sind. Wichtig war uns, durch die Auseinandersetzung auch eine Transformation zu erreichen. Nun möchte ich
Kommt nicht?
allerdings, dass in den Auswahljuries die Offenheit der Kriterien, eine Offenheit, die durchaus notwendig ist, weil nur dadurch überhaupt auf ganz unterschiedliche Kandidatinnen von künstlerischen Praxen eingegangen werden kann. Es zeigte sich also, dass diese Offenheit in Kombination mit dem Zwang zur Auswahl widersprüchlich ist. Eine Auswahl ist aufgrund der beschränkten Platzzahl erforderlich, ist aber auch ein wichtiges Instrument zum Ranking einer Kunsthochschule. Je mehr Studierende sich pro Platz bewerben, je höher das internationale Ranking. Das Verfahren ist also von Beginn an durch Exklusivität im doppelten Sinne geprägt. Zurück zur Auswahljury. Unsere qualitativen wie auch quantitativen Analysen zeigten, dass trotz anfänglichem großem Interesse und Offenheit der Jury diese letztlich KandidatInnen mit einem normativen Körper und einer starken physischen und psychischen Präsenz bevorzugte. Auch wenn diese Dimension des normativen, binären und heterosexuell anmutenden Körpers in den performativen Künsten am stärksten war, zog sich eine ableistische Tendenz durch alle Studienangebote. Auch wurden ältere Menschen abgelehnt, gesucht wurden junge, kulturell gebildete und wettbewerbsfähige Menschen. Ein finanzielles Polster, um sich die Vorbildung und das Vollzeitstudium leisten zu können, inklusive. Generell wurden soziale Kompetenz und ein renommiertes Netzwerk hoch bewertet, manchmal höher als die künstlerische Fähigkeit. Die Jury wählte im Zweifelsfall das Bekannte, also entweder Personen, die sich gut in die bisherige Gruppe von Studierenden einfinden, oder aber so stellten wir fest, passiert über Einschluss. Eine weitere Tendenz zur Diskriminierung beobachteten wir aufgrund ethnischer Zugehörigkeit. Diese sahen wir nicht nur im Ausschluss von nicht weißen Kandidatinnen, sondern auch in einer Sehnsucht nach dem anderen. Also die Sehnsucht, sich von jemandem als exotisch, anders wahrgenommen, kreativ inspirieren zu lassen. Unter den durchwegs weißen Jurymitgliedern wurden andere bei diesen Gelegenheiten als eine große Chance. Beides, der Wunsch nach dem anderen und der Ausschluss, sind nicht nur eine Anerkennung im Sinne eines Othering, sondern auch eine Verstärkung bestehender rassistischer und sexistischer Zuschreibungen. Letztlich stellten wir fest, dass eine klassistische Tendenz sich wie ein roter Faden durch den gesamten Auswahlprozess zieht. In der Verschränkung mit Internationalität wird es besonders deutlich. Das Fehlen migrantischer Gruppen ist gewaltvoll durch die Proklamation von Diversität aufgrund des hohen Internationalitätsgrades verdeckt. Noch immer ist es Standard, die Diversität der Kunsthochschule mit der Anzahl unterschiedlicher Nationalitäten zu beziffern. Auch Internationalität ist damit sehr eng gefasst und wird auf KandidatInnen und Dozierende mit bestimmten transnationalen Biografien aus der Mittel- bis Oberschicht beschränkt. Andererseits werden Gruppen mit Migrationserfahrung automatisch als Unterschicht verstanden. So sprachen einzelne Jurymitglieder in unseren Interviews migrantischen KandidatInnen pauschal eine kulturelle Bildung oder Zugang zur klassischen Musik ab und dafür eine Affinität zum Vereinssport zu. Kunsthochschulen, so konnten wir feststellen, sind ein elitäres Feld, eurozentrisch geprägt, beurteilen den Habitus klassistisch und sind diversitätsunsensibel. Letztlich werden diejenigen inkludiert, die der bereits bestehenden Norm am meisten ähneln. Und somit wäre ich bei der zu Beginn erwähnten institutionellen Normativität und deren Funktionsweise. Die ständige Wiedereinsetzung der Norm führt zu Unterwerfungen von Subjekten, die oft gewaltsame Erfahrungen des Othering sind. Die Privilegien, die sich aus der Zugehörigkeit zu einer begünstigten Gruppe gibt, erscheinen gerade für die Personengruppe als selbstverständlich, die privilegiert sind. Dadurch werden die bestehenden Machtverhältnisse im Feld in dem Maße gesichert und normalisiert, dass Ausgeschlossene sowie der Prozess des Ausschlusses unsichtbar sind. Wir haben dieses Zusammenspiel institutionelle Normativität benannt, in Anlehnung an die Institutional Whiteness von Sarah Ahmed et al. Zur institutionellen Normativität gehört auch, wenn EntscheidungsträgerInnen Hinweise auf Prozesse der Exklusion und Inklusion ignorieren oder sogar verneinen. Als Verantwortliche und Mitwirkende an unserer Studie haben wir diese Abwehr schon während der Projektlaufzeit festgestellt, jedoch erst später verstanden, inwiefern genau diese Haltung von AkteurInnen und insbesondere der Leitung der Kunsthochschulen Teil der Aufrechterhaltung von Diskriminierung und damit Teil der institutionellen Normativität ist. Unsere Hinweise auf die mangelnde Einlösung einer Repräsentation der migrantischen Gruppen störte offensichtlich das Selbstbild der Internationalen Kunsthochschule. Anstatt sich selbstkritisch und konstruktiv mit unseren Handlungsfeldern auseinanderzusetzen und dadurch über die eigene Institution hinaus eine fortschrittliche Debatte anzustoßen, wie das hier bei 360 Grad aktuell passiert, quittierten sie die in der Studie dargelegten Resultate mit dem Hinweis, dass Dozierende so etwas niemals gesagt hätten. In Stellungnahmen bemängelten sie die methodische Durchführung und bekräftigten, dass zum Gegenteil es an ihrer Schule keinerlei Ausschluss von bestimmten Personengruppen gebe. Sie hätten es nochmals selbst überprüft. Und dies, obwohl unsere Studie zum großen Teil von den Kunsthochschulen selbst finanziert war. Also, somit hätte ich Ihnen nun das Problem der institutionellen Normativität dargelegt und auch, warum Diversität an Kunsthochschulen eine Herausforderung ist. Ich habe das so ausführlich erläutert, um zu zeigen, wie vielschichtig die Herausforderung rund um die Einlösung von Diversität an Kunsthochschulen ist. In der Anlage funktionieren die Schulen als ein Garant für Exklusivität, auch wegen dem internationalen Ranking, das gerade für die nicht normativen Studierenden zum Teil ein wichtiges Kapital ist. Aber sie sind auch eine Bildungsinstitution mit öffentlichem Auftrag, für alle zugänglich. Das ist ein widersprüchliches Spannungsfeld der Kunsthochschule als Bildungsinstitution. Ein weiteres Spannungsfeld ist die Prägung durch die zwei gleichzeitigen, aber widersprüchlichen, sehr wirkmächtigen Diskurse der Kunst und des Designs. Das sind einerseits das Verständnis von Kunst als offen, ungebunden, spontan, frei, unerwartet, oft auch kritisch und den sozialen Wandel befördernd und Gestaltung als Tun mit Handlungsmacht. Und andererseits Kunst und Design als das elitäre, exklusive, geschlossene, konservative, geprägt durch sozial privilegiertes, männliches Weißsein. Was ich hier nun aufgrund meiner weiteren Auseinandersetzung und Erfahrung seit Abschluss der Studie anregen möchte, ist, dass es notwendig ist, bei diesen beiden Spannungsfeldern einzuhaken. Und zwar, indem wir das offene, kritische und das Recht auf Teilhabe an Bildung und Kultur anrufen. Hier an der ZADK sind es Interventionen, die den Zugang zur Kunstausbildung und das Curriculum öffnen, aber auch Interventionen in die Organisations- und Führungsstrukturen und in die Personalpolitik. Diese Initiativen sind ein Seilziehen, gleichzeitig mit und gegen die Strukturen. Es geht mir darum, dass ich gerne an den Kunsthochschulen Diversität im disziplinären Verständnis der Künste verankern möchte und sie dann dazu auch in die Pflicht nehmen möchte. Es ist ein zweischneidiges Schwert. Es ist eine Anrufung der Künste in ihrer Praxis und Kreativität, also die Künste in ihrem Tun, als wichtigen Beitrag zur Adressierung von Diversität, nicht in die positivistische Falle zu tappen und Kunst als reines Werkzeug zur Lösung zu verstehen. Ich denke da beispielsweise an die Kapitalisierung von kultureller Bildung mit Geflüchteten oder künstlerischen Projekten zur Einlösung von Nachhaltigkeit. Vielmehr möchte ich anregen, die Künste und auch Design als Teil unserer gesellschaftlichen Struktur und Machtverhältnisse zu sehen und in diesem Sinne auch in der Verantwortung, im eigenen Feld und mit künstlerischen Methoden Diversität einzulösen. Als Bildungsinstitution hat also meiner Meinung nach die Kunsthochschule für die Nachwuchsförderung eine doppelte, hochspannende Funktion. Erstens als Institution trotz der Exklusivität die Diversität erlauben. Zweitens ein Verständnis von Design, Kunst und Künste zu vermitteln, das Diversität als Teil des disziplinären Selbstbildes versteht. Ich danke sehr für die Aufmerksamkeit.
Dear participants, dear Betty, dear Sophie, welcome back. And we have to say sorry. Sorry about the technical problems we had. We are really trying hard. We are working on it. We didn't find the solution yet, but I just want to tell you, dear participants, if you missed some parts of both impulses, both talks, you can watch them again, re-watch them on the website. We will publish them there. But we are really sorry I have to say sorry to our speakers, but I think we will still have a good discussion. Hi, Betty. Hi, Sophie. Welcome. Hi, great that you're here, and Clara is also with me. So dear audience, even if you missed some parts out, I think you can still ask questions. Please don't hesitate, just place your questions and we will try to submit them as soon as possible. I would just like to start with you, Betty. I mean, both of you addressed the questions of recruitment and entrance and limitations within, regarding entrance. So I wanted to go back to the empowerment thought. So how can the arts, because you're working so much with empowerment tools also, how can the artwork as an empowerment for BIPOCs can be translated in the work sector? Because you addressed that it is not enough. You also said it's not enough to place an internship in your institution. You addressed outreach. So how can empowerment translate into this structures which are not really focused on outreach?
Yeah, I think the key thing here is ensuring that the outreach has intentionality. So it's not just about getting somebody through the door, but that you're really thinking through somebody's full journey through the institution. And that really starts with how you are welcoming somebody into the space, the kind of language that you're using in the outreach mechanisms, whether that's job descriptions that you're putting out, flyers at universities. It really does require you to think about the invitation itself. And then once that person is in your institution, or you have a cohort of people or groups of people, then thinking through their experience in the institution. Again, the empowerment piece is important because it is what will help somebody navigate the space, navigate the dynamics of the institution. And, whether there's some sort of cultural representation or reflection back to them within the institution itself, or whether it's actually just about showing interest, right? Like what we want to know more about you. Tell us about like your lived experience, and how can that better inform the way that we're talking to and engaging with the community that you're from externally. Not to say that the onus of engaging people from that community should land on that person or on that cohort, but that you then have a really incredible resource and expertise on your team once that person is there, the people have arrived. So it's I think also about ensuring that they understand how much you value their perspective once you are working with them.
So thank you so much, Betty. So community engagement is a very important issue, but it is also important if you want to access an art school, you need to meet criteria which are not always easy to meet. So Sophie, this is your issue. And I want to ask a very practical question. How can the access to higher education be simply simplified? Keywords like scholarships, quotas, mentoring. How can we do that on a, mittelfristige Ziele, just not a long-term goal, just quick?
Thank you for that question. I think Betty answered some of it in her talk, actually, where she said the institutions, that's actually not the midterm thing, that's a long-term thing, but the institutions need time to develop processes. But on the short term, I think the financial issue, and this is something Betty mentioned, is a big issue where people, yes, have access more easily. And the other thing is, and in terms of finances, that oftentimes you need to have skills before entering art schools. And these, for instance, in Switzerland, are courses that you have to pay by yourself. So if that would be financed, or if there would be fundings for these kinds of courses, that would be very helpful. The other thing is that schools, and I think this is something the position paper mentions of 360 degrees, is that people have to be addressed differently And for that, the institution has to make it a very clear issue, or a very clear goal that they want to address the others or the not normative students. And I think that's the most important thing that has to happen, actually.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Clara, there are already questions. I just wanted to give you one, just pass over one compliment. People are really, really impressed by your talks. I just wanted to give that back to you at this point. It's really, they're really engaged.
Yeah, exactly. There are a lot of props for you both. And we have also a question. What happened at ZHDK, let's say in German, since you published your study?
Sophie, that goes to you.
Yes. So a lot of things happened, actually. More informally, I'd say. But I get this question quite a lot. So that people say, so now you did the study and you developed the recommendations. We called them not so much recommendations, but more fields of action. And and there's this expectation that everything changes to the better. But as I said in my talk, I think this institutional normativity, or how institutions are structured, we have to understand that it needs time, and that's why I was impressed by also Hilary's talk, and Betty also mentions it. You have to take courage and just keep to it, hold on to it. And I see this happening with ZHDK. So this is not change happening from one day to the other. And at the same time, I see a lot of small changes happening from, let's say, bottom up. That people previously, jury members sometimes were quite also offended by some of our results, and they said, we're not like that. And when they understood that it was not about them, but that it was about the whole functioning of processes and of structures and of things that work together and that we have to dismantle together. Mm-hmm. So they started to be more open and asking themselves and rethinking processes and taking small initiatives, small changes, small questionings.
It would be interesting to discuss the acceptance or how we work against this resistance, also this resilience. No, we are not like that, but this is not the issue today. So I will just ask you again. I think there are more questions in the chat.
There's also the question, of course, if the study is somewhere, if you can post a link, that would be cool. And
so okay, we will post a link. You were nodding, so we will post a link. So that's one request.
And maybe one to Betty Avila. Dear Betty, how to deal with own white privileges? Many times good old elites benefit from projects and even from the diversity discourse, not the marginalized.
You're nodding, Betty.
Yeah. I think the question of allyship is important, and I will say that my own introduction into a cultural institution, major museum, that experience was positive and successful because I had a wonderful mentor and ally, and who was genuinely interested in where I was coming from, wanted to get to know me, understand, my perspective. And she really, in many ways, sort of buffered me from a lot of the institutional challenges or dynamics that may have created just a more challenging experience for me. So I think that the mentorship piece is incredibly important. If you are somebody who is directly engaging with a person of color, a disabled person in your team or institution. I think often being an ally, especially now, it sometimes feels performative. And I really feel like you have to focus on, how are you stepping up for this team member or groups of people when they're not in the room, right? When they're not there to hear you or see you, and you're really putting, you're stepping up for them in a way that, might be a little bit more high stakes in a room or in a conversation where, important decisions are being made that they may not be part of. So I think that's what I hope folks will take away, right? Like what is this performative allyship versus what is truly stepping up on behalf of marginalized communities in your institution?
I would just like to add a small question in between. What would it be thinkable with both your recommendations? You are making very, very concrete recommendations to implement a fourth C. Hilary Carty was talking about 3 Cs like courage. For instance, you mentioned courage, but would it be possible to implement compulsory entrance strategies and link them to subsidy criteria that obligates the art schools to include aspects of diversity and inclusion, or is that counterproductive? I would just like to ask you about your estimate or assessment.
Well, I'll start if I can. I think I don't think that would be helpful. I don't think that would be a good idea because you cannot just change the access rules. You have to change the structures because what we found is that it was not only that we studied the entry moment, so the admissions process, but what we found out during our study is that was not the critical moment, but the critical moments are throughout the studies and throughout the institutional process of going through your studies. And if you just change that small moment at the beginning and you don't change the rest, then people will feel very alienated, and it would be very hard on them actually. So before you do that, you have to change the structures and to have more welcoming structures in all ways, in terms of curriculum content, but also curriculum organization, and in terms of welcoming people who are not just young talents, but more advanced talents or more aged talents, and to have structures that allow them to navigate it comfortably. And then we might think of quotas, but maybe then they're not necessary anymore.
Okay, that would be great. We have another. Betty, did you want to answer too? Because you were nodding. Sorry.
Yes. I think that there's a way to prompt an institution to provide some sort of benefit, whether that's funding or other resource. But I think it's hard to enforce in a way. You see a lot of funders in the United States now who are funding diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives within primarily white institutions. And it's like, show us your statement, show us your policy. This is what we want to see, and we'll give you a grant. And there's no way for those funding institutions to then really understand how is this being implemented, what is the experience like on the ground for the people that they're trying to target. So I think that it serves as a starting point, but it is certainly not the full process.
Thank you very much for your assessment. So now we have another question.
Yes, there's another very interesting one for Sophie Vögele. If she could tell more about the longing for the ethnical other in Marx and how it is manifested and how it also contradicts the real diversity.
How does it contradict the real diversity? Sophie? She's thinking.
I think
thinking. Yeah, the longing for the other. How does it contradict?
Yes, so we have to talk about the context, and the context is that the art schools are very white. Now, if we talk about ethnic, the otherness otherness in terms of ethnicity, and if so, what we realized is that the more the groups, the cohort, the students were normative in terms also of ethnicity, the more then there was a longing for something that would mix this a bit up or make it a bit more interesting. And there was a longing for a very quite narrow vision of what this other or this exoticness that would bring some new whatever thoughts into the cohort. And this is, I think, that's the very problematic thing, that it's not about the person that you want to have or that you're open to whoever comes, but that you have that very certain wish for something other, which is then quite violent for the person who represents this otherness in terms of having to fulfill this imagination of biographical experiences. And so, yes, I hope I have been clear about that, but it's and I wouldn't call it positive discrimination, because it is a discrimination. It's a form of discrimination that is quite violent. And we interviewed people who were happy to be part of the school, but then also very insecure about why they had been chosen. And they said, I have been chosen because of my biography or because of my ethnicity, not because of my artistic work. And this is something that is it's not comfortable for them.
No, it's definitely not. Sophie, I would have loved to go further into this subject, and can you just give us a short final recommendation? What would be your final wish for a long-term, honest start of change? Just one word, one recommendation, and then I got this sign already, so we have to stop. But Betty, I start with you.
I'm going to go back to one of the points that I made, that these internship experience or entry-level positions or whatever mechanism that you're using to bring somebody in has to be paid. It has to be compensated fairly.
Okay.
It really young people and emerging talent of any age are not in a position anymore to take on this type of work unpaid. And I think that really does show your own institutional investment in that person and in engaging that community.
Thank you so much, Betty. Sophie, one wish, one recommendation.
Okay,
I know you have lots. No wish.
My wish is a bit complicated, but I think it's a very important wish, and I have been discussing it with colleagues quite recently who have been studying at the ZDK and who have experienced this, that they were perceived as the others of the institution. And what they said, what they would wish for is that they said the institution has to give us some room and make us room available in terms of addressing issues and not always being addressed as the other.
Okay.
But yes, having this room of giving feedback to how they experience the institution and how they experience to be always othered. And I think that would be quite great.
Giving room. Thank you so much, both of you. Sorry again about the technical issues. We hope to meet you in real one day. Thanks a lot. Stay with us, and I see you later on we will definitely see you again in the informal space.